I'm continuing the reading of the book Transactionalism, proceeding with chapter 4, entitled Transactionalism in Contemporary Psychology. Descartes. Aristotle's conception of the nature of man, an organic whole, was to be overshadowed from the 17th century on by the view propounded by the French philosopher René Descartes, whose doctrine it was that man is a composite of a material body and a spiritual soul, a mind united with a body. Whereas for Aristotle, the soul or psyche realized itself in and through the body, and matter and form were two aspects involved in all existence, separable only through analysis, Descartes posited a definite bifurcation of body and soul, mind and matter. One obvious problem that emerges from such a dualistic doctrine concerns the matter of the working relation between mind and matter when the two are considered as different things. Descartes solved this problem by originating his theory of interaction, a theory that assumed that body and soul work directly upon one another. Now Descartes and others before him had asserted that the world was composed of two sorts of substances, extension and thought. Descartes' extension referred to that which occupies space and is located at a point in time. It is the attribute of matter. Thought is connected with the mind or soul, which is capable of knowing extended substance. Thought for Descartes was not merely a reflection of extension, but a separate entity or form of being. Thus, the above-cited problem can be restated. How is a spiritual and unextended substance to act upon a material and extended substance, and vice versa? In Descartes' view, the living body was an elaborate mechanism controlled by physical laws. However, he did draw a distinction between animal and human behavior. In animals, specific mechanisms were responsible for the body's behavior. A concept of reflex was put forward within which nervous and muscular reactions followed predictably from the stimulation of the sense organs. Human beings and their behavior were considered separately because of man's unique claim to a soul, which Descartes had housed in the pineal gland, embedded in the center of the brain. It was the duty of the gland to transmit stimuli to the soul or mind and to transmit impulses from the soul to the body. Descartes imaginatively described one way in which this process operated. If we see some animal approach us, the light reflected from its body depicts two images of it, one in each of our eyes. The two images, by way of the optic nerves, form two others in the interior surface of the brain, which faces its cavities. From these, by way of the spirits which fill these cavities, the images then radiate toward the small gland, the pineal, which the spirits encircle, and do so in such fashion that the movement which constitutes each point of one of the images tend toward the same point of the gland as does the movement constituting that point in the other image, which represents the same part of the animal. And in this way, the two brain images form but one image on the gland, which, acting immediately on the soul, causes it to see the shape of the animal. It is possible, Descartes believed, for incoming currents to work their way out in the form of motor discharges, without the help of a supervising intelligence. This is where the concept of reflex action is introduced. However, as the foregoing quotation illustrates, the soul is able to initiate purposive activity, culminating in a motor response. For Descartes, then, intelligent behavior is an apparently simple phenomenon. The stimulations or currents coming into the brain from the sense organs are like so many knocks on a door to arouse the sleeper within. The soul thereupon takes cognizance of the situation and decides what is to be done. and in conformity with this decision, it switches the cerebral energy into the neural centers that control the muscles for the appropriate response. Thorndike. In the 3 centuries between Descartes and modern times, there has arisen a psychological school which attempts to reduce all human experience to physical reactions. In the same way that mechanical explanations discovered by early man caused the gradual demise of animism, the belief, it will be recalled, that all objects possess minds or spirits, so their application to man and his nature, his behavior, leads to a physicalistic interpretation of the human phenomenon. The school of psychology, Associationism, is composed of several divisions, including Connectionism, of which the founder was Edward L. Thorndike. Connectionism is the doctrine that all mental processes consist of the functioning of native and acquired connections between situations and responses. These connections, or stimulus-response, SR, bonds, are held to be the product of physiological changes in the nervous system, and thus the reflex action alluded to by Descartes becomes, in the present theory, an entire concept involving sensory and motor nerves, their terminal points, or synapses, and the impulse carried around what came to be known as the arc. Thorndike made it quite clear that there was a definite relation between SR bonds and man's nature. Learning is connecting, and man is the greater learner primarily because he forms so many connections. The processes operating in a man of average capacity to learn, and under the conditions of modern civilized life, soon change the man into a wonderfully elaborate and intricate system of connections. There are millions of them. To extrapolate, all behavior may be reduced to reflex behavior and learnings to the stamping in of a new connection in the nervous system. A distinction must, however, be drawn between strict behaviorism and connectionism. Whereas the former assumes that purposive behavior can be reduced to a sequence of reflexes, the latter, as formulated by Thorndike, argues that the responses entering into a complex activity are related to one another in a more intimate way than just temporal sequence. This distinction does not necessarily make for an actual qualitative difference. In fact, at least one commentator finds himself hard-pressed to separate Thorndike's theories from those of the behaviorists. For even Thorndike fell back, in the last analysis, upon an exclusive explanation involving the nervous system, an explanation which implied that the environment does nothing except to press the button which release the reflexes. The important fact for the present study is that associationism generally, and connectionism specifically, have done away with dualism. For Thorndike, for example, dualism is a doctrine by which it is asserted, or at least hinted, that the will, the voluntary attention, the consciousness of the problem, and other entities are endowed with magic power to decide what is the right or useful bond and to kill off the others. Rather than accept such magic powers of decision-making, the associationist concerns himself primarily with the building up of responses considered desirable by those interested in controlling behavior. For him, learning, as has been indicated, is the formation of connections in the nervous system. All consciousness involves physiological movement. As Thorndike would have phrased it, there is no psychosis without neurosis. At the very beginning of the present chapter, psychology was defined as the study of behavior, on the condition that the nature and origin of the latter were not determined in advance. It is fair to state that all schools of psychology would, with occasional minor reservations, subscribe to that definition. However, when human behavior is regarded a priori, as explainable in terms of bodily processes alone, dissenters appear from all quarters. One such group is the transactional school, whose concept of human nature, of human behavior, contrasts sharply with the associationist's view, as well as with that held by many earlier psychologists, several of whom have been reviewed in this section. This study now turns to the transactionalists and seeks to discover the assumptions they set forth as the basis for their psychology. We'll pick that up next time.